To my parents, I was just background noise, while my brother was the golden child. They begged me not to embarrass them at the party just by being there, but they had no clue I had just signed a $7 million contract. When the truth came out, their love instantly turned into panic. This is the story of how I turned the lights off on their perfect world and made everyone settle their debts. Honestly, who chooses a life in auditing? It's just so. Babe. The laughter from my family felt like a series of small, sharp needles against my skin. Sloane, my brother's fiancée, swirled her cabernet, holding the crystal glass like a hard-won trophy. She's not wrong, my father, Thomas, chuckled from the head of the table. Our Meyer has always been the sensible one. The safe bet. My mother, Martha, chimed in with a practiced, sympathetic tilt of her head. We just want you to find a nice man, dear. Your little job is... well, it's fine for now. Sloane leaned in, her eyes gleaming with the predatory instinct of a junior partner at a venture capital firm. She was ready for the final blow. It's actually quite sweet that you think your little spreadsheet macro is a real company, Meyer. Have you ever felt like you're just the background noise in your own life? I didn't cry. I didn't even flinch. I simply set my fork down, the soft click of silver against fine china cutting through the ambient hum of the restaurant. The table fell silent, everyone waiting for me to crumble, to offer the usual apology for my own existence. I looked directly at Sloane, at her perfectly contoured, smug face. You're referring to Clearview, I said. My voice was a flat, steady line. Sloane's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, surprised that the name had even crossed my lips. Yes, she recovered quickly, her poise snapping back into place. A darling little AI startup. Our fund is currently eyeing it. We're expecting to pick it up for pennies on the dollar. Honestly, the founders have no idea what they... You can't buy it, I interrupted. My brother, Derek, sighed with a look of profound annoyance. Meyer, for God's sake. Don't make this awkward. I ignored him, my gaze locked on Sloane. You can't buy it, I repeated. Because I own it. Clearview is mine. The silence that followed was heavier than the dry-aged steaks cooling on our plates. To understand my family, you have to understand that they aren't inherently cruel. They are simply performers. My parents live for the prestige of the Denver Hills Country Club circuit. Their entire identity is a meticulously curated gallery of appearances. To them, success is a loud, visible thing, a German SUV, a firm handshake, a title that sounds impressive over cocktails. Derek is their masterpiece. He's a high-stakes commercial broker who talks twice as much as he works, but he brings home the kind of commission checks that buy silence and respect. And, more importantly, he brought home Sloane. Then there's me. Meyer. 27, a forensic accountant. 3 boring in 1. I'm the person they call when their tax documents are a mess, but the one they talk over at Thanksgiving. I am the designated driver of the family, the shadow that exists only to make their light seem more brilliant. What they didn't know was that while they were performing, I was building. For 4 years, I had been secretly coding Clearview, a forensic accounting engine capable of detecting high-level institutional fraud in seconds. It isn't flashy. It's invisible. It just works. Much like I do. And last week, I had quietly signed a licensing agreement for $7 million. When we left the restaurant that night, after Sloane had turned the color of ash and Derek had started a stammering loop of "Is this some kind of joke?" I didn't feel like a winner. I just felt tired. A deep, soul-aching exhaustion. As I drove back to my apartment through the quiet Colorado night, I realized why I'd kept my mouth shut for so long. It wasn't about humility. It was self-preservation. I sat in my car in the dark, the engine ticking as it cooled. I thought about the dynamics psychologists talk about, the golden child and the scapegoat. A performative family needs both. They needed Derek to be the mirror, reflecting the success they craved. But they also needed me to be the anchor, the one they could look down upon to feel superior. My abhorring a life was the necessary backdrop for Derek's manufactured brilliance. I was the family's built-in a less than. And tonight, I had broken the machine. I had naively thought that the weight of $7 million would finally make them see me. I was wrong. By the time I walked through my front door, my phone was already vibrating with the fallout. It wasn't a series of apologies. It was an escalation. The first text was from my mother. Meyer, you embarrassed Sloane terribly tonight. I don't know where you picked up such a tacky habit of showing off. You need to call her and apologize immediately. Tacky showing off. I stared at the words until they blurred. A moment later, a message from Derek flashed on the screen. Are you out of your mind? You just blew up a massive potential deal. Sloane was trying to help me out. What is wrong with you? Why are you always so bitter? You ruin everything. I scrolled through the vitriol, looking for a single question. Just one. Is it true? What is Clearview? How did you do it? There was nothing. Not a word about the achievement, the technology, or the life-changing money. They weren't angry that I had succeeded. They were furious that I had stepped out of character. They weren't shocked by the truth. They were offended that I'd had the audacity to speak it out loud, staining the perfect family portrait they worked so hard to maintain. The cold clarity of those messages was a gift. This was never about love or support. It was about the script. And I was officially done playing my part. A week passed, just enough time for the silence from my family to shift from hostile to a heavy, suffocating weight. Then the invitation arrived. It wasn't a text or a casual call. It was a thick, cream-colored card, the kind that costs $10 a piece before you even factor in the calligraphy. Embossed gold lettering. You were cordially invited to celebrate the engagement of Derek and Sloane at the High Country Club. I held the card in my hand, feeling the weight of it. This wasn't an invitation. It was a summons. A command printed in elegant script, telling me to get back in line, to show up in a nice dress, smile for the photos, and pretend that dinner had never happened. They were resetting the narrative. They were betting that my fear of being cast out of the family circle was stronger than my need to be respected. They thought I would fold. They had forgotten who I was. I'm a forensic accountant. I don't get into screaming matches. I don't argue. I audit. I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop. I wasn't thinking about the $7 million. I was thinking about the look on Sloane's face, that fleeting moment of panic before she regained a mask. I was thinking about her words, we're planning to buy it for pennies. How did she even know Clearview existed? I remembered a test I had run 6 weeks ago. To gauge the market, I had sent a sandbox demo of the software to a dozen top-tier VC firms. I'd sent it from a burner email under a shell LLC, Northwest Analytics. Sloane's firm had been on that list. I pulled up my server access logs, my fingers flying across the keys. I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused. This was my world. This was the ledger. And the numbers never lie. I cross-referenced the dates, and there it was. The access logs from Sloane's firm. Dozens of hits. They weren't just reviewing the demo, they were pinging the firewall. They were running breach protocols, trying to bypass the sandbox environment and get into the core logic. They weren't performing due diligence. They were trying to steal it. But that wasn't the best part. I build software designed to catch the smartest white-collar thieves in the world. Did they really think I wouldn't have countermeasures? Buried deep in the demo's source code, I had planted a canary trap. It was a beautiful, harmless-looking string of code, but if anyone tried to copy, export, or reverse engineer that specific section, it would silently activate the user's webcam and microphone, recording the next 5 minutes of the session. I navigated to the secure vault on my server. My heart thrummed against my ribs. There was one file from 6 weeks ago. I clicked play. The video flickered to life. There she was, Sloane, sitting in a glass-walled conference room in downtown Denver, leaning over a laptop with 2 senior engineers. "This is sloppy work," one of the engineers said, shaking his head. "The security is too tight. We can't get to the core logic without a key." Then Sloane's voice, clear, cold, and stripped of its country club charm, filled my apartment. "Forget the front door. We don't need to buy it. Just crack this segment here," she said, pointing at the screen. "Find the core algorithm and we'll build our own clone. By the time we launch, the little accounting girl who built this will never know what hit her." I paused the video. I leaned back in my chair and took a long, slow breath. They weren't just arrogant. They weren't just dismissive. They were thieves. And I had the receipt. The engagement party at the country club was a masterclass in pretension. White orchids dripped from every archway. A string quartet played softly in the garden, the music drifting through the open French doors. My mother, Martha, glided through the room, basking in the reflected glory of the upcoming union. I walked in wearing a simple, tailored navy dress, professional, clean, unremarkable. My mother saw me, and I watched her shoulders visibly drop in relief. She rushed over, her grip on my arm just a little too tight. "Maya, darling, you came," she whispered, her smile strained and brittle. "Thank you. Now, please. Just be nice." "I won't do anything, Mom," I said. And I meant it. I wasn't going to do anything. I was just going to finish the audit. I spent the next hour blending into the background, sipping club soda and watching the performance. Derek and Sloane stood in the center of the room like a power couple from a bad movie. The toasts began. My father went first, speaking about a synergy heir and a new beginnings. He didn't really know what the words meant in this context, but he knew they sounded expensive. Then Derek took the floor. He was beaming, high on the adrenaline of his own reflected success. He talked about closing the deal of a lifetime, gesturing toward Sloane. Then, caught up in the theatricality of the moment, he lifted his glass and pointed it toward me at the back of the room. "And I want to give a special shout-out to my sister, Maya," he said, the crowd turning to look. "I know we've had our little tiffs, but I'm so glad you're here. It's good for you to finally see what real success looks like." The applause was polite, but I wasn't listening. I was looking at Sloane. She was smirking at me, a smug, self-satisfied look. It was the look of someone who truly believed she had won. I realized then that I was looking at a perfect example of the Dunning-Kruger effect in a designer dress. Sloane knew just enough jargon to sound impressive, AI, algorithms, disruption, to think she was an expert. But she knew so little that she was fundamentally blind to her own incompetence. She genuinely thought she was the smartest person in the room. She had no idea that their boring a girl in the navy dress didn't just own the room. I had built the floor she was standing on. May I say a few words? I didn't wait for an answer. I stepped forward and took the microphone from its stand. The string quartet trailed off into an awkward, dying note. The room, which had been a hive of expensive chatter and clinking glass, went suddenly cold. Derek and Sloane remained frozen, both staring at me with the same expression of weary irritation, the kind one reserves for a recurring nuisance. I offered a thin, polite smile. Congratulations to my brother and to Sloane. I just wanted to say, Sloane, you were right. I let the sentence hang, heavy and curious, over the crowd. Sloane's eyes narrowed, her suspicion warring with her confusion. You were right at dinner the other night. My job is incredibly boring. I paused, sweeping my gaze across the sea of bewildered faces filling the ballroom. It's tedious work, especially when you have to spend hours auditing internal security logs. Boring footage. Like this. I pulled my phone from my pocket and walked toward the projector they had been using for the engagement slideshow. With a steady hand, I plugged in my adapter. The screen flickered. The airbrushed, glowing photos of Derek and Sloane vanished. In their place appeared the grainy, stark reality of a corporate conference room. Then Sloane's voice, not the melodic, socialite tone she used here, but her sharp, predatory corporate one, blasted through the ballroom's high-end sound system. Find the core algorithm and we'll build our own clone. By the time we launch, the little accounting girl who built this will never know what hit her. You could have heard a pin drop on the plush carpet. It was a vacuum of sound, followed by a sharp, collective intake of breath. My father looked as though he had seen a ghost. My mother's hand was clamped over her mouth in a gesture of pure horror. Derek simply stared at the screen, his face a hollow, absolute blank of shock. Sloane's expression was no longer smug. It had twisted into a mask of reptilian rage. She lunged forward, reaching for the microphone. You! I held up one hand. I didn't even raise my voice, but the coldness in it stopped her mid-stride. Don't. That's called intellectual property theft. It's a felony. And you just broadcast your confession to 150 of your closest friends and associates. I turned back to the stunned, silent audience. But that's not the only news tonight. As some of you just heard, I am the founder of Clearview. I forced myself to look at my parents. Their faces were ashen, their eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and growing shame. And last week, I signed a $7 million licensing deal for that software. My mother made a small, choked sound. But here's the part you'll really appreciate, Sloane, I said, turning back to her. She stood paralyzed, her hands still hanging in the air. I didn't actually sell the company. We're merging. The final signatures went through this morning. We're merging with the parent holding company that owns your venture fund. I let that sink in. I watched the blood drain from her face as she did the mental math. Which means, as of Monday morning, I am technically your boss's boss. I gave her a small, professional nod. I'll see you in the office for your performance review. I didn't stay to watch the aftermath. I didn't need to. I placed the microphone back on its stand with a careful, deliberate hand. The small click of the metal echoed through the heavy, dead silence of the ballroom. Then I turned and walked out of the club. The fallout, as I learned later, was swift, cold, and entirely corporate. Sloan was terminated before 9 o'clock on Monday morning. I never even had to step foot in the office. The parent company's legal department had already reviewed the video I'd forwarded, along with my signed contract, and they escorted her from the building before she could even log into her workstation. There was no room for an argument. Just a cardboard box and a security guard. My brother, Derek, didn't lose his job, but he lost something far more valuable to him, his audience. He didn't break off the engagement. Sloan did. She vanished within 48 hours. The last I heard, she was attempting to sue me for invasion of privacy, but the case was dead on arrival. Derek was no longer the golden child. He was now just the subject of whispers and pity at the country club. He was the man who had been played by a thief. His reputation, the only currency he had ever truly valued, was now worthless. And my parents. They called. Dozens of times. The messages began with fury. Meyer, what have you done? You've made a laughingstock of this family. Then the tone shifted to confusion. Meyer, please call us. We need to talk. We need to fix this before it gets any worse. Finally, they became desperate. I listened to my mother's voice cracking on the last recording. Meyer, please. You've made your point. Now stop. You're tearing this family apart. But they still didn't understand. I wasn't tearing anything apart. I was simply turning on the lights so everyone could finally see the cracks that had been there all along. I hadn't done it to be vindictive. I had done it to end the conversation once and for all. A week later, I sat in my apartment, staring at the finalized contract on my screen. I looked at the $7 million figure, and for the first time, it didn't feel like a secret I had to guard. It felt like freedom. I booked a one-way flight to Italy. I closed my laptop, the click of the lid sounding as final as a vault door, like the last page of a very long and very heavy ledger. That night, for the first time in years, I slept until the morning sun hit the floor. There was no guilt, no noise, just silence. And it was beautiful. Sometimes, silence isn't a sign of weakness. It's just the time you need to finish the audit.